My name is Dale Von Danza. I have almost 30 years in the information technology industry in a variety of industries, including pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, medical device, security, financials, education, and many others, thanks to an extensive consulting career. Today's video is a follow-up to my previous videos on PPT plus C, which is people, process, and technology surrounded by communications, as well as branding for IT leaders and what are VCIO services. If you haven't watched those videos on my channel, I recommend watching those as well. Today's video will be a review on my perspective of the topic entitled Moving from Bros to Pros in Maturing Industries. I will not describe a specific industry until the end of this case study, where I've actually spent about 2 years of research. Because this concept applies to many different industries, not just the one that I've been focusing on for a couple years in an individual case study. I will offer a significant amount of my background on myself just because I want you to understand that you should trust the research I've done for the last several years on this topic. So let me talk a little bit about my background just at a high level. I mentioned I've been in information technology for over 30 years. I've actually been in the industry since I was 16 years old. And I won't say how 50-something I am old now, but that's almost 40 years. Yikes. I say 16 because I was actually asked by my high school trigonometry teacher to substitute teach his after-school adult education classes on programming in the basic language on Apple IIe computers. Yikes. Yeah, that was a long time ago. My undergraduate degree is from the Rochester Institute of Technology, and I have a bachelor's of science in computer science with both minors in psychology as well as business. My master's in business administration is from St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, where I obtained my MBA in management information systems as well as e-business. I wrote a capstone thesis, which was published in a graduate textbook named Cases on Worldwide E-Commerce, Theory and Action. Beyond my formal education, I have multiple certifications, including my project management professional from the Project Management Institute. I'm also a Six Sigma certified green belt from Villanova University, and I'm also a certified Scrum Master from the Agile Institute. I started my career as an applications developer. Some people call that software engineer, programmer. Either way, I started out as a developer and worked in various capacities in the IT industry, including business analysis, quality assurance, technical leadership. However, I fell into the niche of project management, and that propelled me into the world of project management offices, including program and portfolio management, leading eventually to strategic information technology. This included opening my own company, DAB Enterprises LLC, in 2004 and actively consulting until 2010 when I decided to rejoin corporate America. Let's talk about cause and effect. So several events have occurred over the last decade, give or take a few years, during what has been referred to as the fourth turning. The fourth turning is a book written by Strauss and Howe. And there's also been, over the last 10 plus or minus years, exponential growth in technology, including social media. There have been events such as global health crises, as well as events including space exploration and expansion. If you're not familiar with the term the fourth turning, I encourage you to read Strauss and Howe's book, because America has entered a generation-long era of fundamental civic and economic transformation, which started around 2010 and will last well into the 2020s, which is also described in the fourth turning as the decade of crisis and climax. So let's get into it. Let's talk about some maturing industries. There's many industries that have spun up in the last 10 years. As the pace of technology has grown exponentially, the ability for humans to keep up with that technology has been difficult at best. However, for those who are experienced in rapid growth, change management, and strategy, the growth of new industries offers an opportunity to those who have been around the block once or twice, or may have seen a thing or two. So what is a maturing industry? Think of unique things that have happened in the last decade. Everyone's perspective is unique, so there aren't a lot of wrong answers here, but some of them are more on target and opportunistic/capitalistic than others. let's list a few events, and I capitalize that word events, that have happened that may have stimulated new industries. What's happened in the last couple of years? Oh, that's right, a global pandemic. Duh. Inflation, recession, real estate booms and busts. The first iPad was introduced within the 2010 eras. Mental health crises, horrific school shootings, world conflicts, the legalization of psychedelics and marijuana, climate as well as green industries, weather and nature events. All of these individual events, from the pandemic to climate and green initiatives, have opened up or created sectors that may not have existed previously or may have been very infantile in their maturity. So let's just pick on the easiest one because it's of most recent memory for most people. Let's talk about what was the COVID or global pandemic. Think about some sectors, areas of business that were created that didn't exist before the winter of 2020, I should say. So COVID really kicked off in the time frame of around March of 2020. So just before that, if you think of 2019, there were industries that existed, there were services that existed, but when it came to locking down the planet Earth, many of these industries just took off. So you can think about even the use of video services and video technology, applications like Zoom or Teams or WebEx, or the infinite number of other video application services. Real estate, again, both up and down. Other things that took off, interior design. People needed to create their new home and office decor. They needed new home and office furniture, lighting for offices to be on video calls all day. Industries that took off included delivery and shopping services, things like Uber Eats and DoorDash. Air filters, people suddenly found a need to put air filters on everything. Internet services themselves, when people had to be remote, as opposed to going into an office, people had to upgrade their internet services. Niche areas like drones were created. Certain areas of cyber and physical security have been significantly matured. Another interesting area that occurred because of the global pandemic was a significant increase in pet services. More animals were adopted during the global pandemic than ever before in history. And now we're having to deal with that as a result. And ergo, pet services is one of the many areas, thanks to the global pandemic, that have proliferated. So let's follow through on that. So I've mentioned a couple events, I've mentioned a couple sectors that have proliferated. So now what? Should we take advantage of these areas? Which ones? Well, that depends on your why. That depends on your passion and experience. You really have to look at some of the events that have happened over the last decade and those sectors that have been created, and where can you focus to make your life better? And how would I even do that? Well, one of the things I obviously want to do is, if there's a sector that I'm very interested in, I want to connect with people on LinkedIn. I want to do some research. I want to find other people who are key players or influencers in those areas, and maybe even potentially become one of those key players and influencers myself. How about the technology need? Well, again, clearly for anybody who's watching my YouTube channel, the technology is my personal career and passion. So anywhere from the startup of an organization or of a company to the maturation of a company, technology is a key component. So remember, there's two types of companies: technology companies and companies that don't know they're a technology company. Technology is everything, and it doesn't matter whether you're a mom and pop, corner, convenience store, bodega, or a Fortune 1000 company. So what's that crystal ball showing us? Well, the crystal ball is clear that the rate of change is going to continue to move exponentially. Technology will increase exponentially. Resources to manage and capitalize on that technology will become more scarce. So people will need more education and more experience to take advantage of those opportunities. People with this technical knowledge and the leaders who have led rapid growth and who are comfortable with change will excel. So where specifically is the opportunity in these growth sectors? Well, I already mentioned technology. That's an obvious one. But also when it comes to people and talent, human resources is absolutely an area that will need to be capitalized on. Marketing, operations of the company, and of course, financials are all important areas in all of these maturing sectors. So what can people do to take advantage of these opportunities? Well, you can obviously develop a specific expertise in any area that you are particularly interested in. And then once you develop that expertise, you should showcase and market that expertise through many platforms, all of social media, YouTube itself, web pages, etc. You could become an influencer, whether that means you want to become an Instagram or even a TikTok for however long that exists on this planet. You want to become an influencer on one of those social media platforms. Maybe you want to start attending conferences and giving lectures or writing white papers on the topic that's of interest to you. Maybe you want to go on and start doing podcasts, not dissimilar from the Dabble Tech Talk podcast that I have also here on my YouTube channel. So now I want to drill down into a specific case study. So let's talk about an example. One of the things that I have been studying over the past 2 years is because I spent approximately 15 years in the pharmaceutical/manufacturing industry. So I'm very comfortable with industries that have high regulations, particularly those from the FDA, particularly those centered around HIPAA or PCI compliance. So anything that's a very highly regulated industry is just something that I find interesting. So the case study that I'm going to use is something that I've been looking at for about 2 years because I've been watching the development over the last 10 years, but I really honed in on it over the last couple. And I've really done a deep dive into what is the legalization of the cannabis, hemp, CBD, THC product portfolio. So adult use marijuana, as it's more commonly known, or cannabis, became legalized in the state of Colorado for adult use in November of 2012. So again, as I said, within about the last decade, give or take a year. So this video is actually being filmed in the winter/spring of 2023, which is why I'm using approximately the time frame since about 2010 when I refer to events and sectors that have been created over the last decade, give or take. So specifically, when we talk about adult use marijuana, that also stems from the medical use of cannabis. So the industry back in, and I should also caveat, Colorado legalized adult use marijuana back in November of 2012. California had done it long before that, but the industry really, really took off once Colorado legalized it because it became apparent that it was going to spread like wildfire, or, pun intended, grow like a weed. The industry quickly became saturated by Gen Y and Gen Z. Those are millennials and Zoomer, who have always been advocates of the product, but who are now also working, or were also became working professionals who saw the opportunity to get in on the ground floor of this emerging sector due to an event, which was the legalization on a state level of adult use or marijuana or cannabis. So the reason so many young folks got obsessed and began to proliferate in the industry is because many of the large players in the industry, that is of technology. So think of the major corporations that come off the top of your head when it comes to technology, be them Microsoft or Apple or Oracle or SAP. Many of these organizations did not want to risk their federal contracts because cannabis is still, and still is today, federally illegal. It's still listed as a Schedule I drug as of today. As of today, the use of credit is not allowed within the cannabis industry, again, because federally it is illegal. Now, on a state level, not so much. So there was a concern by these large corporations that they would lose their federal contracts if they participated in the cannabis industry at the state levels. Ergo, opportunity. So many young people dove into the industry. They literally created technology from scratch. So those of us who are familiar with technology, think about 3 or 4 of your largest systems in any organization. That is, when we talk about your enterprise resource planning tool, or that tool that controls almost all of your back office operations, from financials to human resources, ERPs had to be grown literally from the ground up to facilitate this emerging market. ERPs is one. Customer resource management, CRMs, point of sale systems, all of these types of systems had to be spun up from scratch because so many of the big players would not participate in the industry. And wow, what amazing technology was created. I inserted this slide in post-production. It was a slide that I forgot to include during my presentation on moving from bros to pros. It's an organization that I belong to called Canatech, which represents the technology of the cannabis industry. As I've been explaining to this point in the video, I spoke about various entities including ERP systems, point of sales, CRMs. You can see by this slide the dozens and dozens of companies that were oftentimes started from scratch to mature a maturing industry. I felt it was worth going back and including this slide in the middle of this presentation. So thank you very much for my inline edit. So on the next slide, I'm going to briefly flip to the next slide just to show the audience, and I'm going to share my screen in a minute to show what the map currently looks like when we look at the United States. So what is it? So when we talk about legalization, it started slow, and then there's 2 aspects to cannabis. There's the medical component of cannabis, and then there's the adult use of cannabis. So despite the federal laws that consider cannabis a Schedule I drug, states were empowered to produce and regulate the dispensing of cannabis for both medical and adult use. So very quickly, I'm going to take a look at the map, and I'm going to share my screen just so folks can see the larger picture. So if you'll bear with me one moment. So here I show marijuana legalization by state. You can clearly see that 79% of the United States, including Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia, are already on board with cannabis legalization. There are only 11 states that have not passed either the medical use or the adult use of cannabis. But as you can see by this map, in the light green states, everywhere that's been approved for medical use of cannabis or marijuana, and then the dark green states where adult use or recreational use of cannabis is now allowed. This is an amazing map. And to think, approximately 10 to 12 years ago, only 2 of these states were green and the rest were gray. And over the last 12 years, the spread of this industry based on this event has created sectors that now people can capitalize on. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So excuse me one moment. That was the map that showed how prolific this area is. So who got in on the ground floor? Well, I mentioned Gen Y and Gen Z. They did an amazing job of spinning up technology for this unique industry. But now, here in 2023, we are at an inflection point where there's a need for some of the older generations in the workforce, Gen X, and even boomers, to help carry the industry, the technology, and the people to the next tier of success. That is to say, with all due credit to many of the Zoomers and millennials who got the industry off the ground, now, as those Zoomers and millennials have aged over the last 10 to 12 years, we all find ourselves in a place where I often talk about there's folks that have a little bit of snow on the side of the mountain, people who have been around the block once or twice, people who have seen a thing or two and helped companies grow from little companies to big companies. So now the opportunity exists to help exponentially grow the organizations, not just the industries. So we can help leverage the technology that has been created and help get that to the next tier of success. Why do we want to, why is it, so why has this all happened, Dale? Well, science over the last 50 years around the world has proven significant medical benefits from CBD and THC, both of which occur naturally in our environment, as well as our own body has natural receptors for these products, these drugs. Since the largest technology companies wouldn't participate in the industry because of the fear of risking their federal contracts, this cottage industry of thousands of technology vendors have spun up over the last 10 years. Over the next 10 to 15 years, as additional federal deregulation of the industry occurs, including the descheduling of marijuana, thus increasing more scientific research, as the banking industry is allowed to participate through the Safe Banking Act, which is in Congress today, there will be yet another example of more growth, as well as the desire to build bigger and better and combine, keyword, great ideas and products, fostering an era of mergers and acquisitions activity that will rival what the pharmaceutical industry went through in the 90s and early aughts. Let's use an example. Let's talk about video surveillance. Video cameras and video analytics all have existed for many, many decades. Let's also talk about ERP, because those two areas are two of my favorite examples. So video surveillance, because to an IT person, video surveillance demonstrates the vastness of what I'm trying to enlighten folks about. So let me just pick on video surveillance for a second. So if you think about the fact that today, since cannabis or marijuana is still a Schedule I drug, every aspect of dealing with the product, from the time a seed goes into the ground to be planted to the time a product goes into a customer or a patient's hand, every piece of that value chain must be videoed because, again, at a federal level, it's still illegal. So think about this for a moment, folks, especially if you're in technology. If you walk into the end product of the cannabis or marijuana industry, which is a dispensary or a medical office, you walk into a dispensary in any of the states that I showed on the previous map, a dispensary might be on average the size of a Starbucks. I think most people can relate or have ever been to a Starbucks or maybe a Dunkin' Donuts. You walk into a store or a dispensary that's about that size, and think about when you walk into that dispensary that, you believe it or not, there's approximately, in an average dispensary, 50 video cameras that are constantly recording every square inch of that facility. And again, video has to cover every square inch, except for bathrooms, from the time the seed goes in the soil to the time it goes into the customer's hands. Think about 50 video cameras in a dispensary or in a storefront the size of a Starbucks. If any one of those video cameras goes down for even a moment, that store has to be shut down, because all transactions and all dealings of a Schedule I drug must be videotaped. So to my technology friends, think about the bandwidth that's occurring in that individual storefront. Think about the storage capacity of that much video locally, in the cloud, transmission. Think about if you have to pull that video, think about the policies that surround that video and its use and its creation and its viewing and its request by the proper authorities. Think about if that store were to close because a video camera is down and can't reopen until that video is back up. Think about the technician that must exist on a local level or in a regional capacity to make sure that your store or your dispensary is not down for long, thus losing incredible amounts of money. So that's why I love that video example, because again, for most of us in technology, you can appreciate just the vastness of that service alone. I also talk about enterprise resource planning tools. such as those popular household names in the ERP world include SAP, Oracle, Microsoft Dynamics, NetSuite, ad infinitum. There's dozens and dozens of ERPs. Those are some of the big names that people might recognize. Think about the fact that because this industry was spun up from scratch, there's ERPs that are just coming up in the cannabis industry that are controlling everything from what we call seed to sale. So that is all of your back office operations from farming to distribution. So that was my case study. And I've been looking at that for over 2 years now. And I'm telling you that the next 10 to 15 year runway in front of that particular industry is green. Again, pun intended, sorry. But you can look at any of the events, any of the sectors that have happened and have been created over the last 10 years with that same mindset. So be alert to these events as they occur. Think about and explore the sectors that others might not have when these events could inspire the creation of or the maturation of. Look ahead to plot where these sectors will evolve to, make connections in those sectors now as quickly as possible. Talk to folks on LinkedIn, go to conferences, write white papers, become an expert, become an influencer. And then you'll figure out where you and your company can add value to those emerging sectors. So that's it. That's my lecture on moving from bros to pros in maturing industries and companies. Hopefully you found it interesting, and hopefully it made you think about some areas of opportunity that could exist for you, particularly within the technology sector. Thank you for joining us today, and I appreciate your time. Have a great day.